Hi, everyone. It's Charlene Lee. And today I'm going to be talking about how to make your transformation, whatever kind of transformation it is in your organization, a business transformation, digital transformation, a culture transformation. All of these changes are incredibly hard. So today we're going to talk about how to actually make them viral. Now, the reason why I'm so fascinated by this topic is that usually when we think about something going viral, it's usually a product having to do with consumers or even B2B. There are so many examples in the consumer space. You think about all the social networks, you think about things like Instagram, even Slack within businesses. Those are things that grew with a viral network. But I'd like to talk today about how to think about creating viral networks and virality. People think the idea of things spreading on their own, getting a life of their own in the context of transformation. So if you're coming in today, I would love for you to share just how have you been able to scale your change or transformation efforts in your organization? Because that's what we're talking about today. It's not just coming up with a plan, but how do you start executing it? And also, how do you start scaling it so that more and more people are coming on board, believing in the change, and actually supporting it and starting to advocate for it outside of their own experience. So it's hard to think about people getting really excited and charged up and wanting to go out and evangelize about a transformation. It's usually the other way. People are saying, do we really have to do this? Can we just put it off another quarter? Can we just not do this? Or can we just do it a little bit less intensely? Because that's a lot of change that you're asking for. So we oftentimes find ourselves pushing these transformation onto people who really don't want them. What if it could be different? What if it could be that people are seeing some transformation happening, other people really benefiting from it and saying, hey, I want some of that. It seems to be really benefiting them. It's really pulling them in rather than having to push them into this. So I want to talk a little bit about why virality and movements and creating this groundswell is so important. So in the book I wrote in 2019, The Disruption Mindset, I talk about three components that are so important. And one of them is the ability to create movements. And in particular, the ability that movements have a key part of creating that momentum for transformation and disruption and change. And I love this quote from the New Power authors. It's a wonderful book called The New Power. And they say it's a movement only when it starts moving without you. That's when you really know that you've been pushing so far and pushing it along as a transformation person, as a leader, as the CEO of an organization. And then it just starts happening. It starts moving. And we hope that transformations take on that kind of momentum too as well. So one of the things that we can do is like, well, how do we get that change moving and going? So I have this great comment from Jay. Thank you, Jay, for sharing this. One of the things that Jay does to keep that momentum going is he puts together a strong communication plan, and then provides good monthly updates about the impact. So that's fantastic. That's a great way to be communicating that. And one of the great things about the communicating the impact is then people can see, oh, I see this change happening. Maybe I want to see and check it out more because it might be beneficial for me. And I want to take that to the next level to say, how do we actually create this change, this small network at the very beginning, and then be able to have it grow and do this with intention from the beginning of your transformation. Or if you're in the middle of your transformation, how do you start doing that to get you going? So what I'm going to talk about today was gleaned from a lot of the great work that Andrew Chen did. Hopefully you can see this book. It's called The Code Start by Andrew Chen. It's called The Code Start Problem by Andrew Chen. And it talks about how to start and scale network effects. And as I was reading the book, it again talks mostly about consumer and business products, business products. But I thought it could really be applied to transformations also as well, because again, transformations themselves need movements and network effects and virality. And the core of this, which is why I want to talk about this today, is the creation of an atomic network. Atomic networks mean that It goes down to the basic molecule of what is needed to get this thing going. And what struck me when Andrew talks about the atomic network, he talks about it's the smallest possible network that's needed to be stable and then can grow on its own. The smallest possible network of connected people, connected users that can stand on its own, can be stable enough, and then can grow on its own. And he talks about how it needs to be as small as possible. It needs to have tremendous density and connectedness, a very, very simple value prop. And then very importantly, it's about how do you actually then pull those people together and position them so that they can then find nodes in other departments so they can create more atomic networks and then create tipping points that then can actually scale. And if you've seen S curves that kind of go up like this, in the beginning, it's really slow. And then you reach this acceleration through the networks. And then finally, you start accelerating and you get everybody using this. So think about how that could work for your transformation. If you have this small atom, and Jay Johnson goes, yep, exactly. It's the most basic atom, which is what I love about this. It is the most simple way that you can think about the transformation. And if you think about most change management plans or business transformations and digital transformations, they are big, huge, they're thought through really carefully, like implementation plans like crazy. And we need to have those things to know where we want to get to in the end and where we want to begin. But when you start implementing it, I think it's really important to break it down to the most basic component. What's the most basic value prop that you can start with? Keep it really simple. And you may think, well, that's just so simple. That can't be enough to get people going on this. But I'll tell you one organization I worked with, they just decided that e-signatures, that was what's going to be. It was going to be a sea change, simple tool and technology. But they realized that that was going to be a simple thing that they could start with a small group of people and then be able to have it jump into different nodes and different departments. And that very quickly, people would be using it all around the company because they'd see the benefits of it. They would see it, they would hear about it, people would share how they do it. Frankly, they would get somebody else to sign a document, and that person goes, well, that was so easy, I need to go do that too as well. So eventually, very quickly, within a few weeks, everybody was using e-signature. And then they used the same exact program to think about all the other changes they wanted to make in transformations. So again, one of the key things to do in the transformation is to start thinking about this in the smallest possible team possible. What is the most basic way that you can start? What are the people, who are the people who are most densely connected to each other, who can be on this initial team, this atomic network, to be able to start executing on that transformation? So one of the key issues here is to be very, very clear about the value proposition to the team. And if it's too complicated, if it's too much with too many details, then you're going to have a really hard time people wrapping their minds around what does this mean? How do we actually see the value behind it? And if people do not see the value, they will not pick it up on their own. So I have some great comments here coming in from Marissa, for example. Start small and offer choices that don't include the status quo, which I love. The choices may not be comfortable, but in discomfort lies the solution to grow. Marissa, that's really a great way to think about this. So give them options, give them choices, but none of them includes the ability to say where they are. And I love that idea of starting small. And Jay Johnson also has an issue here. Brownian movements seem to be governing quality. Randomness plays a significant role. Despite our best efforts at directing, and I think it means virality, it is not always predictable. And absolutely true, because when you have Brownian movements, you don't know exactly when you set things up if it's going to go in the direction that you want, which is why, again, these atomic networks, starting small, you can see exactly how it's developing and adjust as you need to be able to move it in the right direction. And then as those atomic networks start to gain traction, instead of trying to grow it immediately, what you do, and this is counterintuitive, you jump over to another place, another node, another department, another team or group. And you find where there's some connection and you start doing the atomic network there too as well. And again, you can see how it develops to see where any random atoms are going off in the opposite direction where you may want it, and you can bring it back and square it back to where the transformation needs to go. So it sounds so simple, but what I find so many times is that when we're talking about a transformation, when we're talking about putting in a change, for example, a new recruiting platform or a new way to be able to collaborate with each other, we're throwing out Slack, getting rid of Slack. We're all going to use Teams now. And you may be able to just have that happen naturally, but so many people may just say, I don't want to go on to that. I'm not used to it. How do we actually keep it going? And I would say that there's this one value that comes up: come for the tool and stay for the network. And the reason why this is so important, it's never about just the tool. It's never about just the change in the technology or the digital platform. It really is about how that allows you, once you get into it, to do the job or whatever it is. Then you see the underlying network that lies behind it. And so the value, the real long-term value proposition, lies with the network that is enabled. And inside of organizations, this is typically about more information sharing happening, more openness, more transparency that becomes available, and then also the ability to connect with people in more seamless ways. So one of the key things I find with transformations is that we oftentimes don't think about these network effects that can be built in to basically encourage transformation and actually speed it up. Because when you can see not just the tool and the digital part, but you can see your relationships within the organization starting to change and to get better because you're more connected with each other, those network effects become like gold inside of a transformation. So Knox says here, that's what's in it for me. Basically, you have to be able to talk about why is this value prop, why is this change going to be so impactful? What's in it for me? And being able to explain that in very, very clear terms. So, and Jay also has another comment that the network is about the relationships among people. So well put, Jay. One of the things that I oftentimes talk about digital transformations, business transformations, is that we don't talk enough about the people part, because that's the part that's actually transforming. And the network effects, again, are really about the ability for these relationships to change and transform, because that's why it feels so disruptive. We feel disrupted and the change is hard because we don't know how we're going to be able to connect with each other anymore. The old way no longer exists, as Marissa was saying. The old way, the status quo, is no longer an option. Now we have these new ways of connecting with each other. And we're not quite sure how it's going to work. Am I going to be capable of doing this? So showing with the network effect the benefits of what that transformation is going to have, making sure there are people there, that Atomic Network is there to welcome all these new people in, again, shows what that value proposition is. So a couple other quick things when you're trying to build this Atomic Network. The first, again, is just to keep it as small as possible. The reason why, when you add one more person, it isn't just 10 plus 1. It is exponentially more difficult to make sure that this person's perspectives, experiences are meshing with everyone else in the network. So it becomes exponentially more difficult to build that atomic network the more people you add to it. So keep it to the bare minimum that you can. This is not about having every single department represented. This is about creating that great, huge amount of density of people who are going to really build a really strong, tight network with each other. They may have worked together on previous teams. They may have the same agenda they can benefit from. But whatever that point is, that connectedness needs to be really strong right from the get-go. And the second thing is, again, I mentioned before, be very, very clear what the value proposition is. If this network is there, be clear, this is what you're going to gain from working with each other. And then build in also the ability for this team, this first atomic network, to be able to connect and anticipate what the anti-network effects are going to be. Because you're going to have all these naysayers, as you know, in the organization. People who say, well, you can't do that because this is where we've always done it for 80 years. We know this is the best way. You have to build into that atomic network that resilience to anticipate these anti-network effects right from the very beginning. And so it's either having people who have experience with this and can speak from the first person, say, I know what they're saying, but I know that's not true. And the other people in the network, because they're so connected to each other, will believe that and be able to counter those anti-network effects that may be coming in. And then the last thing, which is kind of the hardest, especially when you have these big plans for transformation, is don't worry about scaling at this point. Don't worry about how much it's going to cost. In the beginning, it is all about making sure this atomic network is strong and that it is rich and that it is full and can stand on its own. Again, the definition of an atomic network is the smallest possible network that is stable and can grow on its own. So you may have to invest in it, you may have to feed it, but I guarantee you that if you can create that atomic network and invest the time and the money and the energy into making sure it's really robust, then they will do the work of scaling this across the organization. I guarantee this is what we see happening over and over again in successful transformations. The last part I would say is that one of the most important parts around this is to, again, keep in mind, why is this even a needed thing? Why are networks and movements and virality such an important thing when it comes to transformations? And it is because these transformations happen over a long period of time. We're talking about years. And they also are extremely difficult. You're challenging the status quo that just has so much built-in resilience. You have rituals, we have habits, we have value props and incentives that are all there to maintain the status quo. So you need every single tool, every single ability and capability to be able to counter that just this non-momentum that's there. So the idea is to think about, how do you actually create this so strongly? And Knox has a really good point. It's interesting. I like this concept of the atomic networks. We usually start with a pilot to prove it out and get buy-in. But atomic networks sounds so much better than a pilot. And you're absolutely right. Because the problem with pilots is that you think about them as, well, we'll see, we'll experiment, we'll see, we'll try to make it better. But it's a fishbowl, and everyone is sitting there like, is it going to work? Is it not going to work? And in some ways, you're kind of rolling the dice and hoping that we can make it work and that it'll be so successful that other people will see it and benefit from it and see the goodness of it and want to pick it up. Atomic networks do it very differently. We know it's going to be great already. We know from the get-go that this is the transformation. This is the change that we want to create. So you're starting with the same idea as a pilot. But instead of calling it a pilot, you're saying, we're just going to go and do it. And it's very simple. It's really clear. We know we're going to make adjustments as we grow this thing. So it's similar to a pilot. But there's no judgment at the end of it. What, did it work? Did it not work? We're just going to go for it and make it happen. And the key is that atomic network has buy-in right from the very beginning. You don't have to keep selling a larger and larger group of executives with your pilot, because inevitably there's going to be somebody in that executive team and in that advisory council, whatever that work group is, that says, I don't like this. We're going to kill it. Instead, you're putting all the people who already, quote, have the approval. They're the ones who are going to actually make this work inside of the atomic network. And so you already have approval moving forward that this is a change you want to create. Now, it's harder in some ways. You have to start smaller, but I guarantee you it'll be so much faster, and that the effects and the retention will be so much stronger if you start from this base instead. All right, so here's another comment from Marissa. So make a few bold attempts outside the standard. They won't all work out, but a few will, and that helps reach new audiences. So great wisdom again. Thank you, Marissa, for contributing that. I think in so many ways what you're saying and sharing here, Marissa, is that you know that these atomic networks, some of them will take off and some of them won't. So instead of trying to figure out which ones will work, let's just launch a bunch of these things across all the different initiatives and feed them, set them up to be successful. And then we'll have to make some adjustments. But again, the ones that do connect, that do create these nodes and then tipping points, are going to be the ones that are going to be successful. And you're going to be so much better off just creating that network, that atomic network, and just letting it go, letting it grow on its own, tweaking it and making sure it has the key ingredients that it needs to grow, but then letting it grow on its own. Because there are so many things you have to tackle in your transformation. You can't put your attention on all of them all of the time. And then to that point, Jay has this great point that atomic assumes intrinsic bonds, some physical magnetism, electricity that's holding these things together. And organic may be much more accurate in terms of a growth than viral. I think in the beginning, you're absolutely right, Jay. It has to be organic and natural to that atomic network. And it's how you construct that network right from the beginning, that they have this natural attraction and connection to each other. And if that's strong, the need is clear, the value prop is clear and simple, that they all agree in it, they see the network effects, and they start spreading into all these different areas, that's where that growth comes. But I don't want to fall away from the idea of making this viral, because I do believe that transformations, when you're talking about transforming the entire organization, you can't do it just from these organic little sprinkling of points. At some point, there needs to be that tipping point. It needs to start scaling. And again, it all comes back to the huge value proposition of this transformation of the relationships of people creating these networks that will reinforce the use of these tools. Because I don't know if you've seen the experience that I have seen, but oftentimes there's a new tool that comes on board, a new technology platform. Everybody gets trained on it, and then nobody uses it. And it's because, what's the value prop? I learned how to use it. I went through the training, and I don't see any direct need for it. But if somebody says, hey, I'm on this tool, I'm using it, come and collaborate with me on it, that becomes that network that is the reinforcing factor for all of this change to happen. We oftentimes say that change doesn't happen in a vacuum. And if you believe that one person is just going to miraculously change the way that they work, the way that they think, the way they connect, that just doesn't happen. They're usually pulled in again by other people saying, come join me, come do this new work, look at this information in a new channel that has that value behind it for them to see that value. And then they're being pulled into these new ways of working, into these new transformations. So that's what I have to share for today. The thing that I want to share for next week is going to be one of my favorite topics. And that is going to be about what is the future of HR? First of all, I think we need to start calling it HR, human resource. I mean, I don't know about you, but I really don't like to be thought of as a resource that could be added, removed, taken out, just exited from the company. How do we think about this future? What does the future look like? And I have some pretty radical thoughts that I wanted to share, and look forward to sharing those with you. So again, please write back to me. Find me on all the various social networks, of course. Email me, Charlene@charlenelee.com. I would love to hear from you and hear, how is it going? How is it going with your atomic networks? And in particular, how are you thinking about setting one up? Is it working? Is it not? So I just want to say a couple last thoughts. Thank you, Knox, Keith, for coming to these sessions. It's great to see you here week after week. I'm glad you're finding these to be helpful today. Thank you, Jay, for joining, and all these wonderful things. And Knox asked me, am I going to be at South by Southwest next week? I am not. I'm not going to be in Austin. I'm bummed to miss it. I just came back from a long trip. I'm going on another trip the week after, so I needed some time at home. So I will be watching South by Southwest from afar, but wish all the people who are going there safe travels and have a wonderful time. I can't believe it's actually happening live again. So enjoy the community there, the relationships, set up a few atomic networks there while you're there to hopefully build some beautiful new relationships. And I will see you all next week, next Tuesday, when we talk about the future of HR. Okay, thank you and have a great week.